What's up, freaks? This is just me, and today we're looking at the most aesthetic and classic looking bodybuilders of today's lineups. So, of course, considering what I just said, this metric is not objective. Both beauty and aesthetic lines are in the eye of the beholder for sure. But that being said, this video is gonna include the most objectively aesthetic bodybuilders, I guess, meaning the ones that are known for having classic pleasing lines, something similar to what is on screen now. So what we're gonna be looking at are small streamlined waistlines with awesome V-tapers and golden era reminiscent proportions. But I'm also gonna be weighing heavily how statuesque and polished one bodybuilder is on stage, and it's also gonna help if they hit aesthetic poses and actually pose classically. A big, imposing structure, and of course, full round muscle bellies, along with good condition and separation, plus good looking insertions, as I mentioned, classic lines. This is all gonna be bait in this video. To a lesser extent, also completeness, I guess. This is very important too, and you might even want to consider things like skin quality, even though that sounds a little bit weird. I can't really define or describe what it looks like, but you're gonna understand what I mean during this video, in case you can't imagine what exactly I'm talking about. Aesthetics is a very subjective thing, but I suppose we can all agree Arnold, Flex Wheeler, and Sean Ray looked more aesthetic than Ronnie, Branch Warren, and Big Ramy, right? So, you know what I'm talking about. Now, let's start. We're gonna try to go from the least aesthetic to the most, but that's not the point of this video at all. So let's get right into it, shall we? We are gonna start with a surprising entry. I want to mention the 2018 Mr. Olympia Sean Roden, because if he had had the chance to compete in 2019 and on, and if he hadn't unfortunately passed away recently, he would have been high up on this list. I mean, he looked crazy good, like a statue in these shots. He's got so much polish, small waistline, as you can notice in the front double, so much detail in the quads and glutes. He looks great with great muscle bellies and also the arms. The conditioning and separation look very good, but he's not too grainy or vascular, which would make him look freaky. The side chest and the twisting back double bicep shots look super aesthetic and statuesque. This man is an example of what an aesthetic physique like I'm looking for today is. So, may he rest in peace, and we are gonna go on and get into the actual entries for this video. A guy to mention for the start, if you ask me, would be a current bodybuilder, Martin Fitzwater. You might not be familiar with him because he is not top tier, but he's got an aesthetic appeal for sure, in my opinion. He hits a slight vacuum, and his waistline looks very small, which is the main reason I included him in this video. For those who find this type of physique really aesthetic, it's got a place in my video. I think he looks really nice on stage. Similar to Camilo Diaz, who is also great aesthetically speaking. He is blessed with a decently small waistline for a man like him, and he's got great lines. He's pretty polished, and I like to see him on stage because the physique, to me at least, it just looks very good. Reminds me a little bit of someone like Sean Ray. I might be alone with this, but he is classic to me. And this phenom from the IFBB Elite Pro League, Michael Cruzo, looks pretty aesthetic, sure, too. He doesn't have a Sergio Oliva waspy waist, but he's got huge arms and pecs that really help him to look pleasing to the eye. Sure, he's freaky too, but I find this physique is far more aesthetic than most. Sure, he is more aesthetic than any guy of his size nowadays. So let me know if you think Michael Cruzo is aesthetic. And Sergio Oliva Jr., he is also in this video because he's got an insanely tiny waist and flaring lats, creating a crazy V-taper shape. So his torso looks very unique and I think pretty good. He's got a bit of a flatter bicep peak, but overall he looks really good and in my opinion would represent the aesthetic part of bodybuilding nowadays. And he's got really good cuts in his muscles too. I have Blessing Awodabu too, mainly for his tiny waist and great V-taper, because that being said, this is not one of my personal favorite physiques. I don't really think he looks very aesthetic or reminiscent of the golden era or whatever, but I have heard some people say that he is really aesthetic and they like this type of physique more than the freaky ones. I don't know, but I have a spot for Blessing too. You can let me know if you agree with me or you think he has got great aesthetics. It's true that he has got a great physique with a small waistline. So if that's what people find aesthetic, then good for them. The next entry I have is Nathan Diasha. He is decently aesthetic. I wouldn't count him among the best in the current era, but he's got a crazy small midsection and a huge X-frame, also round, full muscle bellies, and that's why I included him. He looks very statuesque in the side chest. He hits that shot very well, and the front lat spread, his structure just looks unreal. He might have a little bit of a longer torso, but he also has very wide shoulders and quad sweeps. And next up is this young folk by the name of Hunter Lebroda. He's one of the representatives of aesthetics in the top tier of the open class nowadays. He has got a pretty trim waistline, although his ab separation could use a lot of work. But he's got a decent X-frame thanks to the quads and the good structure. He boasts good insertions and looks cut and separated almost every time he steps on stage. So although he's looking big, he also looks really proportionately built, and a large factor with Hunter is actually the way he likes to strike his poses. He just poses so gracefully and flowingly in his routines, and even hits his mandatories in artistic ways, which I think is great. Next up is a top tier bodybuilder and Mr. Olympia actually, Brandon Curry. He is very competitive on a bodybuilding stage, and partially it's because not only does he have an awesome upper body muscle-wise, with round impressive muscle, he also has a very small waist, which makes him look that much better than someone with a larger midsection. Brandon's got a huge V-taper effect with very wide lats. He looks super polished and very classic. He's got good lines, for sure. A little bit of a smaller lower body. Not horrible, but a little bit more skimpy. But aesthetically, it doesn't really hurt him. A lot of people tend to prefer a smaller lower body, so really, Brandon was a great aesthetic Olympia champ, just like Sean Ronden was. Here we have an up-and-coming bodybuilder who actually comes from the classic division, Regan Grimes, but now he is in open and he is top 10 at the Olympia, so no slouch here. One of the most aesthetic and streamlined bodybuilders going nowadays, if you ask me. He has got a beautiful structure and a nice midsection, great development, a good frame. He is a great bodybuilder, got good insertions and a world-class back. I think he just looks very good on stage because he was made to be aesthetic, whatever he does. I don't think that's bad at all. His physique is very appealing, which is certainly good for the sports development. We need some aesthetics nowadays, right? And Regan is one of the people that bring it, and he also looks chiseled and separated. And another Olympian I want to mention is Chopin, the Persian Wolf. He is a great representative for the more eye-pleasing men's open physiques, too, I think, thanks to his super prominent abs and overall ripped look. I'm not sure if he would be considered classic by most people, but I think he's got a good waistline, an X-frame, and some incredible conditioning that just makes him look that way. And also the vacuum in the open class on a guy packing that amount of muscle is really, really impressive. He always brings world-class conditioning, but he's never too vascular or doesn't look too grainy. He still maintains some aesthetics. But this guy is surely more renowned for being aesthetic. That is Cedric Macmillan. He's tall with an awesome frame and a small waist for an open bodybuilder of his caliber. Really good development everywhere. He's so complete, and the muscle bellies are very round. Just great genetics on this guy. He's a phenom. Also, great classic posing, of course, and execution. A very polished look all the time. I mean, he's a class act. So, Cedric Macmillan, such an eye pleasing physique. I bet you definitely expected him to be on this list because he is notorious for placing well, even though he rarely brings outstanding conditioning. He just wins on his structure and presentation. And this guy looks big and really muscular, along with looking to have a big, impressive frame, just like Cedric Macmillan. It's Dwayne Walker. His physique looks very beautiful. His waist is tiny and the abs look amazing. Look at him in all these three pictures. The classic part just screams out of it. The pose on the left looks very good, and then the side tricep, he looks super polished, in my opinion. In the front lat spread, this is a great X-frame. Very imposing and menacing, but also extremely aesthetically pleasing. And he's got great aesthetic lines. And no dispute about this gentleman being aesthetic, Quentin Uriah. He looks great, undoubtedly. Tiny waist and the arms and chest look very big. A nice shape to the muscles too. He's got a good structure and not the biggest bodybuilder, but he is one of the most classic for sure. He looks great in all these poses. And the execution looks pretty great and aesthetic too. And here we have Patrick Moore. What can I say about this guy? He is a really good competitor. He lacks a bit of size in comparison with other top pros, but he is far more classic and aesthetic than most of them. In the front double biceps, this is a perfect example of the unreal V-taper. That's seriously the most waspy waist I remember ever seeing after Brian Buchanan and Sergio Oliva. It has to be. He's hitting a great vacuum, which also helps a lot because the arms don't look that massive, but it really is not a big deal because look at that V-taper. He looks good from the back because of the V-taper too, and extremely chiseled and polished in the side tricep pose. The execution looks masterful. This guy is also very known for being aesthetic. So of course he's gonna make it on my list. But this is a new guy, a new IFBB pro, CM Gosens. I might have said that wrong and I apologize for that. But as I just said, he is very new to professional bodybuilding, so we don't know him that much yet. But he has a really small midsection, great V-taper, decent enough conditioning, and of course, he does need some more mass as well as refinement, but I still bet it's safe to say he will be one of the most classic and aesthetic looking open pros in the future. That is if he competes in the open class, right? But he earned a pro card in the open, so I include him in this video. He's got a really polished and aesthetic look to him. As well as Samson Dauda. Look at him, he's so incredibly polished and classic. The posing always looks great. Those poses are just awesome. He's got a small waistline and midsection, very reminiscent of the 19th aesthetic icons, in my opinion. The only thing he needs a bit more of is the muscle development. He definitely looks like he has got some place on his frame to fill out, but he has got a bright future. He just needs to get a little bit more mass and conditioning, and he is going to be very competitive because he looks so aesthetic. Next up is Raphael Brando, who surely represents the more aesthetic build of nowadays bodybuilding, and it's no wonder. He is really chiseled and maybe a slightly smaller waistline than some of the other guys do. He also looks supreme, and he has got great development everywhere. His abs and the quads are so separated and look so nice, and the physique is very complete. He looks exceptional in the front lat spread and from the back too, in my opinion. Look at the nice side tricep execution. What more do you want? He just looks very good and very fresh on stage as well. But here we have another new IFBB professional by the name of Marcelo de Angelis. Maybe that's his name. And a lot of bodybuilding fans have been saying lately that this has to be one of the most aesthetic, if not the most aesthetic, current pro. Now, if he competes in open again, like it was with Sim Gosens, we can't be sure. I still included him because not including this physique on a list of the most aesthetic would be a sin. He is really so good. I mean, the vacuum, the teeny tiny waist, and the separation everywhere, and also the muscles that look like they have been put together so perfectly. He's got a good structure, great V-taper, a really strong physique on this gentleman. If he can gain a bit more muscle, he can do good in the open class. And I have Lionel Bayaki here as well on this list because I find him so aesthetically pleasing. He's got beautiful feathering in the quads, which looks really aesthetic. He is very genetically gifted, no doubt about that. Then he's got a ridiculous waistline measurement with some great abs, which really helps his poses. His body parts are awesome. He's got round and full muscle bellies, although he usually doesn't place that high in actual lineups because his conditioning is not as good as the other bodybuilders. However, he is separated enough, if you ask me, and he looks incredibly statuesque too. His physique looks very impressive and so aesthetic, which I feel like we can all appreciate. And lastly, this is Mark Hector, one of my favorites on this list. He mainly makes it on this list by the virtue of his tiny waistline, which is really unbelievable. That's Brian Buchanan-like. Look at that. It looks like a genie bursting out of a bottle. Amazing. And the huge V-taper, the lats and the rib cage, tiny midsection. It's amazing. Especially in the back poses, it's nearly unbeatable. His waistline is nearly the size of his arms, and it's half as small as the shoulder width. These are some amazing proportions. The physique would need some more improving and tuning to place better in the open lineups. He doesn't have horrible development, but he just needs to add a little bit more muscle, I guess, that would really help him. But on my list of the most aesthetic, this guy definitely deserves to be mentioned. He looks like a golden era competitor to me. So guys, let me know down in the comment section below if you enjoyed this video and agree who are the most aesthetic or most classic looking open competitors in current bodybuilding in your own opinion. And do you find aesthetics important? The judges most of the time don't really seem to. So do you think it should be changed, or do you actually prefer more freaky, huge physiques with mass and conditioning? Because I'm not really sure on my own opinion, to be honest. I would like to hear yours. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to watch some classic bodybuilding videos and also like and subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your